Hello and welcome to the Sisters for Fitness Wellness Show. I'm Stephanie Gaines-Bryant. Our guest today is Kendra Holmes, and she's an advocate for the transgender community. Welcome.
Hi, how are you, Stephanie?
I am doing great. Glad to have you here today.
Thanks for having me on the show.
So, what I want to talk about today is some of the issues that people in the transgender community have to deal with, but I want to start by telling your story.
Okay. To start off with, from what I can remember at the age of 13, I started dressing in women's clothes, mostly my mother's clothes at first and stuff like that. And this was a constant battle for years. The problem was I was also very athletic, and I felt like, you know, okay, I love playing baseball, I love playing football and stuff like this, but I was still drawn to dressing in women's clothes, and I didn't know why. I just knew that that was something that I felt comfortable in for years. And it got to be where it was a real big struggle and a battle for me. It got to the point where I actually went to see a psychiatrist about it.
So it was a battle with your parents? Was it a battle just that you were having within yourself?
Within myself, because my parents didn't know anything really until a little bit later. But then that's when they decided to send me to see a psychiatrist to talk about issues that I might have been dealing with. And of course the psychiatrist, because of being depressed and stuff like that, it put me on medication to deal with it. And actually, eventually down the road, I had a struggle battle with that, because I was like, why am I still on this medication and still feeling the way I feel? And so I kind of weaned myself off of it to just basically say I can find another avenue to do. It got to a point where even at one particular time, I actually took all of my clothes and threw them off over a cliff, thinking I was killing the person that was inside of me. And eventually that built back up to where I was dressing again in about 3 or 4 months down the road.
At what age was this?
What, throwing the clothes off the cliff? Probably maybe around 22, something like that. So that meant that I was dealing with it even from 13 to 22. But what's on my business card especially, it says 40 years of wandering no more. It took me 40 years to figure this out, what was going on. And if it was a close friend of mine who took me to a conference called the Philadelphia Trans Health Conference. And at that conference, I got to see other transgender people around there who were being their true selves. And I saw actually 5, 6, and 7-year-old kids being supported by their parents and stuff like that of who they were. And I'm like, wow, that is very interesting. So I actually attended some of the workshops and got to hear other transgender people's stories. And I'm like, wow, this is, great. This is who I really am inside.
So at 40 years old, or it took you 40 years before you really began to live your truth?
Well, actually, I was 43 at that time, but from the age of 13 to 53, it was 40 years. And so within that, that's why I came up with the 40 years of wandering no more. And at that conference, I left that conference gung-ho, coming back to work, saying I got to do something to go ahead and transition, because this is who I really am inside.
So what was the transition process like?
Well, I talked to a co-worker at work who also happened to be one of the attorneys at our agency, and she talked to someone in the Department of Civil Rights and Inclusiveness, the director there. And at that point, that's when the director heard my story from her, and she was in tears and stuff. And so my friend, who was the attorney, she comes back and says, look, I told her your story. She was in tears. I said, okay, well, let me go talk to her now, because I wasn't, she kept my name privately before. So I talked to her, I got the same response. And then she said, well, let me talk to the CEO of the agency, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, you were afraid that you might lose your job as a result of transitioning?
I did, and that's probably somewhere in the background of my head, thinking that's why I didn't come out a little bit earlier, because I just didn't know, not only didn't know who I really was, but the fact that, something's not right if somebody at work found out about who I was.
Now, so you're saying one of your concerns was employment. What were some of the other concerns? Like before, when you decided to keep it inside and not to be who you truly felt you are, what were some of the issues, social issues, dating? What were some of the issues that you found most difficult?
With my parents, I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to explain it to them. And after I made a decision coming back from the conference, I said, I've got to do it. And I actually waited about 2 weeks before I was actually going to transition on the job before I told my brother, my father, and my mother. My brother, when I told him, he was very accepting. He said, just give him time to adjust. When I told my dad said, you know, after 5 minutes, who am I to judge? But I elaborated a little bit more with him. And he said, you know, you basically have told me everything I needed to know, but I accept you. And I said, great. I said, is there anything else you want to ask me? And he said, yes, I got one more question. I said, what's that? And he said, are you going to keep your last name? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, okay, no problem. Like it was no big deal. And I was like, whew. And I was really afraid about that because in the Black community, fathers and sons, it's like, you know, hey, you know, this is my son, you know, and they're very proud of having a boy in the family and stuff. But he was very loving and great about it. And then I told my mom, and that was the scary part. I made her laugh because she's the type of woman that really cares and loves me very much, but I know she worries a lot. And so when I had a couple of my cousins come with me and we sat there and I told her the story that I was transgender. And the issue was, there was no issue, but she told me when I told her what my name was going to be, which she had never told me before, she said when she was pregnant, if she had a girl, she was going to name it Karen. And I just totally lost it at that point because I said, wow, this is who I truly am inside. And so the next day was like a 140-degree turn with her. I said, I still got 40% still there. So I gave her a stack of information to read and stuff on who was going to be training me, not training me, but my agency. And she read it over all that next day, and she started feeling a little bit better, but she still had her concerns and worried about it. And so after that, she started feeling a lot better. I gave her a couple of books. One of the books I hadn't even read yet, and I wanted to borrow it, get it back from her so I could read it. And she said she had loaned it to a neighbor. And I'm like, why'd you do that? I haven't even read it. She goes, are you serious? She goes, everything that you're doing now is in that book. And I was like, wow.
So what is the process like? Do you get some sort of psychological preparation for what it's going to be like for you, or what the transition is going to be like? How do you prepare yourself?
Well, I feel mentally I was really prepared because I really prayed about this for years. Why does this keep coming up and stuff? And then when I made that decision, I just felt God really places his hand on me at that point and just led and guided me through the whole process. So the friend of mine that took me to the Philadelphia Trans Health Conference showed me paperwork that she did to go through the court system to get the name changed and stuff. And so I just started formulating, okay, I'm gonna get my name changed at the court, which took a couple of months, which is great. After that, I wanted to go get my Social Security card changed, which I could have gotten it done in about a week, actually the same day, but it ended up being a week. I was at one location in Maryland. They didn't understand or didn't know what to do. I went to another location, and I was getting ready to get turned down there, but one of the ladies at the counter goes, oh, I know all about that, I'll take care of her. And so she took care of it. I got my Social Security card done that day. Driver's license, I could have had it done the same day, but I just missed the lady by a couple of hours. It was right before the holiday, and I ended up getting my new driver's license in a week.
What about the medical concerns?
Well, I did have to see a psychiatrist because of the hormones I wanted to take. So I had to go through that process of dealing with that I did like 4 sessions with her. And after the 4th one, she said I'm clearing you to get on the hormones. And
So you have to be cleared in order to
yes,
use the hormone treatments?
yes. And I think what really set that one in motion is my final answer when I told her, I said, and she asked about relationships, and I said, you know what, if I never get in another relationship for the rest of my life, I'll be happy. It's just basically, I'll be me and I'll be happy and I'll be my true self. And she says, wow, that's excellent. She goes, you're good to go. And so that's what happened.
So were there any surgeries involved with this?
Nothing with the hormones and stuff. I actually, right after I transitioned, I had a 5-year game plan. And the game plan was in 5 years to go ahead and have what we call SRS, which is surgical reconstruction surgery, or some people say GRS, which is genital reconstruction surgery. And now the surgeons are using vaginoplasty surgery. And so anyway, hours before my 5th year anniversary, which was this past, the beginning of this month, October 1st of 2010, hours before October 1st of 2015, my surgeon called me up and said, we've got a surgery date for you, April 8th of 2016. And that's where I had the big surgery.
So this has been a process that's taken years.
Yeah, and for me, that's the way I felt like I was being led. Some people get it done right away in a year. Some people may take 2 years. Some don't get the surgery, but they know who they are in their mind, heart, and spirit. And that's what being transgender is all about, is who we are in our mind, heart, and spirit. It's got nothing to do with sexuality, which is what a lot of people think, oh, are you gay or are you lesbian? No, it has nothing to do with that. That's who we are. I mean, a 5, 6, and 7-year-old kid doesn't know anything about sexuality. All they know is, this is who I am. I'm a boy or I'm a girl.
So for the people who don't understand, when you make the transition, what is your sexuality? You are attracted to men or attracted to, or it varies from person to person?
It does vary from person to person. And usually when that question comes up, I stop them right then. I go, first you have to understand that being gay, lesbian, or bisexual is who you go to bed with. Being transgender is who we go to bed as. So it has nothing to do with sexuality. For me personally, I still am attracted to women. I think, sorry guys that are listening out there, but women just smell better.
I'm going to tell my 3 sons, because you are absolutely right.
Yeah, so it's got nothing, that's just the way I am, and I'm still attracted to that. I have met some guys and I'm like, wow, he's really cute. And I have had a couple of friends who I'm like, oh wow, I wouldn't mind dating him, but one just last year moved to Seattle, Washington, but we still keep in touch every so often or when he comes in town. But it's nothing like a dating thing.
But in sitting here talking to you, it sounds like you're very comfortable with you.
Absolutely.
And that's the most important relationship to have.
Exactly.
Let's talk about some of the concerns, because you advocate for the transgender community. What are some of the concerns that people in the transgender community have, things that they want people to understand?
Well, we really are good people. We really want to live an authentic life. We want to be just in the mix of everybody else. We don't want to be judged by our outward appearance. Just to take you back to a letter that my mom wrote to a very good friend of hers who was a little standoffish a little bit about my transition. My story of my life is who I am from even before as Tony, but now as Karen. The story in that book is all about my life. But the outside of the cover used to be Tony, and now it's been changed to Karen. Just because the cover's changed, the story still remains the same. So it's got nothing to do with that. A year after I transitioned, I joined the Maryland Defense Force, we supported the Maryland National Guards. In 2012, by the Maryland Defense Force and the Maryland State Guard Association, I got NCO Soldier of the Year, which is non-commissioned officer. And then in 2013, by the State Guard Association of the United States, I got Soldier of the Year of the country. which is out of 24 states and 23,000 soldiers. We're out there. We're doing great things out there. And the sad thing about it, when I got those awards, a lot of the female soldiers were coming up saying, "Great job, you're doing it for us." Yes, I'm doing it in my mind, heart, and spirit because that's who I am, but I'm also doing it for the transgender community, which I really couldn't say because it was still this battle of whether we should be even allowed in the military.
That was my next question. A while back, there was a move to remove transgender people from the military.
Right. And it's so funny because the day that the Twitter went out about us being in the military, my phone was blowing up like crazy, like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" I was actually up in Delaware doing a habitat mission with my church, Twinbrook Baptist Church, and it was so bizarre that the fact that my phone was blowing up, everybody was really concerned of how I felt, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, because I'm out there working. And then I found out information that the tweet went out about, banning us from the military, and I'm like, this is crazy. If he only knew what we are doing and that we're doing great things in the military, why would you want to get rid of us? We put a lot of training into our soldiers to do anything and everything, and he wants to kick us out of the military. There was a funny article that I saw, I can't remember what paper it was, but you had the president standing up on this building along with another gentleman, and there's Skid missiles heading toward the Capitol, and the guy goes to the president, we did have somebody who could take that missile out of the air, but he was transgender. And I'm like, that's exactly it. We don't, why get rid of people who are talented in the military because of who they really want to be?
Good answer.
So,
we have seen in recent years the number of crimes against transgenders increase.
Yeah.
What can we do to give people a greater understanding, not to hate what you don't understand?
Exactly. It's really sad. And I've actually got to speak, I think it's like 5 times I've got to do the Navy Yard. I'm doing 3 locations for Kaiser Permanente and then one in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania for an event called Transgender Day of Remembrance. And we call it, shortness of, it's called TDOR. And that's a celebration that's done every November 20th. And if you get a chance to go to one of those events that are all over the world, you'll hear names that are read by all the transgender people that have been murdered that year. Right now we're up to 22. I don't know the exact number, but I want to say there's close to either 19 people of color that have been murdered. And that's very, very high for us.
This year?
For this year. So far there's been 22 from the last number I got.
What have you seen? What's happening, or what do you think the reason?
I think it's people that just don't understand, and they're just being brutally cruel, and they're committing these murders. The one thing I've been trying to help the transgender community, mostly the women, is staying out of areas that they probably are unsafe. Definitely letting your partner or whoever you're with know who you are right from the beginning. I've got some girls I've heard say, "Oh, they'll find out eventually," and I'm like, no, why do you want to do that? Because I don't want to see your name next on the list. There's some that have been relationships with those people, and I guess somehow the word got out about it, and maybe that person turned on them, and then they've committed murder against that person. Or it could be just basically somebody sitting in a bus stop and they get stabbed in the back or stuff like that. So there's been all kinds of situations, or a trick that turned bad and ended up getting murdered. I try to, tell them, you need to let people up front, especially when it starts to get to be physical with that person. You need to let them know up front. I go one step further. Especially if a guy asks me to go out, it's like, okay, you need to know something first. Before they spend $75 to $150 on me for dinner, I want to let them know up front before we go out, because afterward they could probably say, hey, you fooled me, you tricked me, I spent all this, and I didn't want to be with you like that, then they may harm me. So
you're saying some crimes take place because the person hasn't identified who they are, and once the other person finds out, then there's that degree of anger, and it goes wrong.
Right. And I think that, men probably have this stigma of, they know, hey, that's a beautiful woman there who looks like it, but then all of a sudden they find out that used to be a guy. Now they figure like they've been wounded, their manhood's been wounded, and that's when they come out with the violence.
What would you say to our younger folks, the younger generation of folks who are coming out, who want to make the transition? What is your advice?
My advice is, and which I've been trying to tell a lot of them, is build yourself a platform so when you tell people that you're transgender, they're going to actually say, I don't care, I just want you. The surprising thing before I actually came out, and this is just based on who I was personally beforehand, I do volunteer work with the Red Cross here locally, CERT for Prince George's County, RSVP, which is Retired Seniors Volunteer Program here in Prince George's County. And when I told them I had something to tell them, they gave me this funny look like, what are you going to tell me? And I said, well, I'm transgender. And they went, we thought you were going to leave the organization. To me, that meant they saw the value that what I was bringing to the organization. And that's what I would like to get the younger people to understand. Build yourself that platform so when you decide to come out to them, that they'll get the same response that I got. Actually, in 2015, I was honored in a magazine called The Platform Magazine. And in that magazine, I was among 41 other women around the world for up and coming inspiring females with a platform. I was the only transgender woman in that magazine. So it's like, this is awesome to be among other women around the world for someone who has a platform. And that's what I'm trying to get them to understand is, build yourself a platform so you'll be accepted. And also don't be all gung-ho to say, oh, this is my pronoun, I want you to use this, and this is who I am. Give people time to adjust, because when you transition, you're not transitioning by yourself. Your family's transitioning with you. Your friends are transitioning with you. Your job. It took a while for some of the people at my work to understand that, but it took time for me to understand that too. But they're at this point where at my job, they don't even see Tony anymore. They see me.
What would you say to parents to help them understand if that's a choice that their child has made?
Well, right there, when you use that word choice, we want you to change that to say we made a decision to transition. And the reason why, because we're transitioning for our own life. We want to live who we are. So we don't look at it as this was a choice. We made this a decision that we had to do. With parents, like my mom and my dad and my brother, we're all family. We love each other. And my mom, said, I love you unconditionally. That's the way parents should be. You brought that child in the world, for whatever reason in the womb, that there's this little bit of a hiccup, that maybe changed the DNA in our bodies to be who we really are. We know it's not something that's fake out there. This is what we feel inside, and we hope our parents can understand that that's us.
How do you talk to folks too about staying safe physically when it comes to contracting diseases, things like that? How do you stay careful and safe?
One, the safety part of it, as far as having sex, definitely wear condoms and stuff like that, because HIV is very high in the transgender community, and that could be whether they've had the surgery or not. They're still having intercourse that way, so they definitely should be wearing condoms at all time, no matter what, and for both partners.
What about children who are going through things, but the parents are not supportive? There are a lot of homeless teens out here who feel like they have no one?
It's really tough, but I know a lot of the teens, when they meet people like it's funny because sometimes I'm called mom, sometimes I'm called auntie, and it's because they want to gravitate and hold on to somebody who's like a family to them. And we are, our community is a big family, and we love each other, we support each other, and they find that we are their support. It's just tough, but we want to, the parents definitely need to not kick their child out because of who they are. I mean, my almost entire family, except for a couple uncles, have kind of disowned me. But it's like, you know, hey, my immediate family, my mom, my dad, my brother, they love me to death. I could care less.
And you said at work it's been a pretty good situation too. After you announced or whatever and you went through the process, your co-workers have been supportive.
Right. When I first left, I thought in my head, because of who I am and what I do in the community and stuff, I thought I would come back to work with a 5 to 10% of an issue. And I actually came back with 1 or 2%. And to me, that's great odds. So I really wasn't really upset about that. And even in that 1 or 2%, there was one coworker. We were in a class called boot camp writing class, and we were there with 18 people from my agency and 2 other people from another agency. And so it was really weird. The last day, they said we talk about anything in the class at the last day, and I'm like, okay, so I was going to talk about my experience being down at Joplin, Missouri for the tornado. And so when I went down there, I was going to talk about that experience dealing with people and helping people. And then like about 15 minutes before I was getting ready to go on back from lunch, I felt God say, talk about your transition. And I went, now you want me to talk about this? And I was really nervous about it, but I went on and did it. And one of the girls that was in the class who heard my talk happened to be one of the 1 or 2%, because she came up and said, I really want to apologize to you because you really are a good person. And I think I was one of those 1 or 2%. And we're good friends now. Not great friends, but good friends. And matter of fact, that the whole department has kind of warmed up to me a lot better too as well.
And that's good. That's a good story to wrap up our discussion on. It's wrapping it up on a positive note.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you for having me on the show.
We have been talking to Kendra Holmes, and you've been talking about your support, your advocacy work within the transgender community. And we will give your information at the end of the show during the credits. So if people want to contact you or what, they're able to do so, Auntie. I don't know if I like this auntie thing either. It makes me feel old because I'm a lot of aunties too. You've been watching the Sisters for Fitness Wellness Show. I'm Stephanie Gaines-Bryant. Have a great day.